Hello, I'm Kyla and welcome back to the Infinite Library. So, I've wanted to do a video like this for a little while now, and it's something that I've seen around a little bit and I just thought it was really fun. So it's something I thought I'd just try myself, and that is I'm going to have a look at my best and worst books according to Goodreads. So, as we all know, Goodreads ratings can be all over the place, and I don't always really trust what Goodreads ratings are for books I'm going to read. Like, I look at it as just a kind of a guideline, but I try to take it with a pinch of salt because I feel like it is just kind of a popularity thing and it can be so different. But yeah, I got to thinking and I thought, I was looking at what my favourite and least favourite books of the year was, and I was looking at the difference between what my personally are and what Goodreads thinks it should be according to its average rating. And then because I basically, how I do my Goodreads is that I categorize every book that I read into the year I read it. So I joined Goodreads, gosh, when was it? Let's have a look. Go on my profile to double check. I've got using my laptop here because I need the help. So I joined Goodreads back in 2012, so quite a while ago now. It's been over 10 years I've been using Goodreads, and in the last couple of years is when I've basically making little lists on there which I put every book into what year I've read it. So I have a good idea of when I read all the books and what I rated them and from when I joined in 2012. So what I thought I would do is, rather than just looking at this year of my worst and my best books are in Goodreads, I'd look at the last 10 years because I'm genuinely intrigued to see not only what the ratings were back in the past, back when I really started getting more into reading analytically, but also how my tastes have changed. Because I can tell you now that when I started using Goodreads, I was that person that was like, here's a 5-star, here's a 5-star, here's a 5-star. I didn't really rate analytically. I wrote very much on emotion at the time. And I can tell you now that I'm going to list all the 5 stars that I rated from those years. And boy, I'm in need of a 5-star audit because I'm pretty sure a lot of those books, if I reread them now, would not be 5 stars. But it's really fun to look back and see what you thought back then about what your favourite books were. So we're going to do this from oldest back in 2013 up until the most recent 2023. I'm filming this currently on Boxing Day, the 26th of December. I don't think I'm probably going to be reading any more really good books or really bad books, hopefully, in the last couple of days. If I do, I will just update this at the end if I have a drastic change in my favourite and worst books. But yeah, I just thought this would be really fun to just see how things are over the last 10 years and to see how different my favourite and least favourite books are according to Goodreads average ratings. So we are starting way back in 2013, 10 years ago. I'm also just going to do some stats as I do this just because it's fun. I read back in 2013 a pretty good amount. This was when I was at university still. I was doing my undergraduate, I believe. So I'm pretty sure for this year and probably for the next year, there's going to be a lot of academic books in there, and I think that the rating's going to be a bit all over the place when it comes to academic books, because I feel like that's when you get a lot of books that don't have very many ratings. So a book might be rated really high or really low, but maybe 15 people have actually rated it on Goodreads. So that's going to be fun to see. So in 2013, I very impressively managed to read 281 books. And I can tell you now, a lot of those are probably academic books from university, and I bet there's a lot of manga because that is when I was at my peak of manga reading, and I was just devouring series, lots and lots and lots of manga series, which you'll see when we get to my 5-star audit. And that is why there are so many books. I don't know how many actual sort of novels I was reading. I'm not sure how much I was reading for fun back then, but somehow I managed to get 281 books, which is insane. Before I go over all my 5 stars, let's take a look at what Goodreads says was my best and my worst. So, if we take a look, and we're going to order by average rating, and we have, strangely enough, an art book, which I didn't even know was something that you could really rate on Goodreads, so that's really strange. It is an art book I still own. It is the Pandora Hearts Odds and Ends art book, which I think is is it the first art book or the second art book? This is for a manga series by John Mochizuki. It's like a fantasy Alice in Wonderland kind of story. It's really fun. I really love this series. But yeah, here we go. So it's rated on Goodreads at a 4.72, 192 ratings, only 12 reviews. I did rate this as a 5-star. So it's just art though, is the thing. It's not really something you read. So I don't know how I'd rate it. I mean, it's a gorgeous book, don't get me wrong, but it's not like a book you read. So yeah, that's a weird one. That is like my top rated book according to Goodreads for that year. If we just scroll down to look at the second one, it is a manga, and it is also Pandora Hearts, specifically volume 17. I'm not sure why that volume in particular is higher than the others. I'm guessing something really big happens in the story at that point. The average rating for that is a 4.58. And I did rate it a 5-star, so I guess I am somewhat in agreement with that. Let's see how many people review. I feel like this one does have more decent reviews. Yeah, we've got 95 reviews, over 2,000 ratings, so that is a little bit better in terms of reviews than an art book, but it's just really amusing that it's an art book. It's like my best book of the year according to Goodreads. If I had to pick what I personally think was my best book of 2013, then I'm gonna say it was Clockwork Princess by Cassandra Clare. I read, don't yell at me, I have 65 5-star books in 2013. 65 out of 281. That is not good. I think I'm a lot more selective now about what I 5-star. I have a suspicion if I reread a lot of this stuff, I hope some of them would still be 5 stars. I think Clockwork Princess would still hold up as being a 5-star. I think a lot of these, I would probably drop them down to a 4, maybe even a 3. Like, I was just really not that analytical back then. So yeah, I would say if I'm actually looking at what my own highest rated book of the year is, like I have 65 to pick from in terms of 5 stars, but out of all of those, I'm going to say Clockwork Princess by Cassandra Clare was my favourite book I read that year. I loved it, I devoured it, I have a huge adoration for the Infernal Devices series. It's my favourite series by Cassandra Clare, and that was the finale book in the series, and I loved it. So yeah, that I think would actually be my favourite book of the year. Not an art book. Even though I love Pandora Hearts is probably still a 5-star manga series as a whole for me, but I don't think the art book would be because it's just art. So looking then at the 2013 worst books according to Goodreads, let's see what we've got. Okay, yeah, here we go. We have our first incident of an academic text coming in, because my worst book, according to Goodreads, has an average rating of 1, just 1, no points, and it is Virginia Woolf, Reevaluation and Continuity, a collection of essays. I did English literature, in case anyone was wondering. English literature and creative writing. So it's by someone called Ralph Friedman. Oh, this is embarrassing. I'm looking at the page now. It has 1 rating. That's my rating. I am solely responsible for this book being a 1-star, and no one else has marked it. Oh, that's embarrassing. So yeah, that is obviously a book that isn't really widely read. It came out in like 1980 or something. I obviously didn't like it either because I rated it a 1-star. I rarely rate 1 star, so I must have really hated this book. Let's find one that isn't for university, because I have a feeling all of these first couple we have here that are all very low rated are for university. So yeah, second book is about Rider Haggard. We've got a book about the Well of Loneliness, a feminism book about Virginia Woolf, David Garrick, something about writing history in the fin de siècle. Okay, here we go. We have something that I think is finally me reading for fiction, and it is a graphic novel, I think. Goodreads has rated it as a 3.08, and I rated it 3 stars, so kind of in line with that. And it is a Marvel graphic novel called Spellbinders, is the series, but this is the first volume, and it is Signs and Wonder. Art by Mike Perkins and Andrew Hennessy, and I guess written by Mike Carey. The picture is very familiar to this, but I do not remember anything about it. I obviously picked it up because I was getting quite into Marvels and superheroes at this point in time, but I guess it was just average, which seems to be the case. It is about a high school girl called Kim Besco who moves from Chicago to Salem and finds that the local student body is divided into rival factions of witches and non-witches, with both sides bidding for her allegiance. It apparently collects 6 issues of a series called Spellbinders, but it looks like it didn't continue. There's like a volume 1, and there doesn't seem to be anything about it continuing after that point. So I feel like it's just a standalone. And maybe it just wasn't popular and it didn't get carried on. So yeah, according to Goodreads, if we're not talking about academic texts, then that is my worst book of the year. I'm pretty sure it isn't. So if I were to look at what my worst book of 2013 was gonna be, okay, so I have 2 books that I apparently never rated, which are 2 volumes of Soul Eater, randomly. Don't know why I didn't rate that, but there we go. And then right at the bottom, in my 1 stars, okay, so I have The Host by Stephanie Meyer, which I rated 1 star, has an average rating of 3.86. I'm pretty sure a lot of people have read this. I didn't like it, I guess. I don't think I finished it, you know. I think it was a DNF for me, and I just wasn't into it. It's funnily enough one that I actually wouldn't mind rereading though, because I think it's one that I've heard people either like or don't like, and I've actually heard more people liking it. So I'm kind of intrigued now about rereading that one. So yeah, The Host was my lowest book at a 1 star. A lot of these other books that I've rated 1 stars are like academic books. There's a couple of manga actually. I apparently really didn't like the first volume of Full Metal Panic because I rated that a 1 star. And yeah, that's basically it. All the rest are academic stuff. So I guess that was my worst book of the year, was The Host, pretty much, or a manga. Yeah, that's quite fun. That was my 2013. And now, just to call myself out, I'm going to list for you all of the books that I rated 5 stars in 2013, because why is there 65 of them? Okay, let's do this in rapid fire. Clockwork Princess, Black Butler, volumes 1 to 14, The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, The Lovely Bones, Vampire Knight, volumes 3 to 6 for some reason, The Last Unicorn, Prince of Thorns, White Cat, Maurice, Sometimes the Magic Works, Lessons from a Writing Life, Tales of Mystery and Imagination, Uncle Tom's Cabin, Mirror Mirror, Autobiography of a Geisha, Orlando, Pandora Hearts, volume 13 to 19, plus some random light novels as well, Young Avengers, Moby Dick, The Silence of the Lambs, Soulless, the manga, volume 1 and 2, Attack on Titan, volumes 1 to 7, Sailor Moon, volume 1, Dancing the Vampire Bund, volume 1 to 3, Dancer from the Dance, Tokyo Babylon, volumes 4 to 7, Sirius Blooms at Night, Woman on the Edge of Time, and The God of Small Things. Some of those I did actually read for my course, and I really enjoyed them. So I had some bad books that I read for university, but I think some of the actual texts I had to read that weren't just like academic essays, I quite enjoyed. So that was my 2013. Moving on to 2014, ridiculous number of books I read again. I was clearly still at university at this time. I read 220 books. And of those 220 books, 91 were 5-star reads. So, yeah. Oh dear. Okay, so let's have a look at what Goodreads thinks was my best book of the year. Okay, so Goodreads thinks that my best book of the year was Volume 2 of Adakin, which is a manga series written and illustrated, I believe, Tsukiji Now. I really do enjoy the series. I rated it 5-star, and it has an average rating on Goodreads of a 4.61, and let's see how many ratings there is. This was quite popular when it was coming out, but it's a series that I think has been quite forgotten. Yeah, there we go. It's only got 5 reviews, 140 ratings, so not many people have actually read it, but it's a really good series. It's like a dark fantasy-ish kind of series. It's also quite smutty, but I enjoyed it a lot, and I think I still enjoy it, honestly. It's got some gorgeous artwork. So that was what Goodreads thought was my top of the year. It was still a 5-star, so not completely off the wall there. Looking at what I read for that year, though, I think my best book has to be The Night Circus, because that was the year that I read The Night Circus, and at this current point in time, it is still my favourite book of all time. So, has to be The Night Circus. What does The Night Circus actually have as a rating on Goodreads? I'm curious to see how different it is rating-wise. So I know this is a book that is reasonably popular, but it's also a book that I feel people will either love it or hate it. So it has got a lot of ratings, a lot of reviews. It's currently sitting at 4.02, which isn't bad. So I think it's still pretty popular, but yeah, I'd say that is definitely my favourite book of 2014 that I read. The worst book then that I read, according to Goodreads, here we're seeing one of our first discrepancies. So with a rating of 2.79 as an average, it's The Village by Nikita Lalwani. I don't remember anything about this, but I gave it a 4-star, so I really liked it. A brilliant coming-of-age story, apparently, that looks at an extraordinary village. Oh, I do remember this. It's looking at this village in India, and it is told from a BBC filmmaker's perspective, and she's using the village as a subject of this documentary. This village is an experimental open prison where basically it's a whole bunch of convicted murderers, and they live there with their families, and it's kind of about the crew investigating them, and this quandary between this journalist's moral judgment and her professional obligations. I don't remember a whole lot else about it, but now I'm looking back at it and I remember I really liked it, but it hasn't got very good ratings. I'm wondering why it doesn't have good ratings. People saying they don't like the characters, that it's really slow. Oh, it's saying a lot about how it's quite stereotyped. Yeah, the characters just aren't well written, I guess. So that seems to be the consensus from what I'm seeing. There doesn't seem to be anything majorly offensive about it, but yeah, people just didn't find it very interesting and they didn't like the main characters, so I apparently really enjoyed it, so that's interesting to see that. Yeah, that was the worst book of the year for me, according to Goodreads, but it was a 4-star for me, so there we go. I think then let's have a look at what my own rating was. So I have Snowflower and the Secret Fan by Lisa C, which has a 4.09 average, but I rated it a 1-star. I feel like I reread this and I really liked it when I reread it, So that's interesting. Then we have something called David's Story, which has an average of 3.36. I rated it a 1-star. Oh, this is definitely something I read for university. It's a post-apartheid novel. Didn't like it, obviously. Don't remember a damn thing about it. Then there was a dark fantasy, paranormal romance kind of thing, which I dropped. Definitely dropped some of these other books. Let's go down until we can find something that isn't academic, because I don't trust that Snowflower and the Secret Fan was actually my worst book, because I feel like I reread it and I think I really liked it when I reread it. So we've got a bunch of academic stuff. Okay, here we go. So I'm in the 2-star ratings, so it's actually not a 1-star. And if I'm going to have a look at all these 2-star ratings, It is going to be... So I dropped 2 books which were really bad. One was called Insanity by Aaron Jordan, and another was another like sci-fi romance called Start by Odette C. Bell. I didn't finish either of those. I actually have a couple of manga as well that I rated 2 stars. So I think the one that I'm gonna pick, because I literally don't remember anything about it, is called The Sacred Blacksmith by Isao Miura. It looks like it's just like a fantasy romance kind of thing about a woman who's like a knight, and she has to protect this like city and prove herself in battle, and then she apparently gets in a fight, her really prized sword gets broken, and then a blacksmith comes in to rescue her. Don't remember why I didn't like it, but it does sound suitably generic. It has a 3.66 rating, but I just rated it 2 stars. So yeah, I guess that was my worst book of the year. Let's very briefly go over all of the 5 stars I read. Again, there's a lot of manga series, so it's probably not as bad as it looks. We have Magician, Laughing in the Cloud Sky, volumes 1-6. Bride of the Water God, Volume 4. Trinity Blood, Volumes 2-15. Don't know what happened to 1. The Final Empire. X 1999, Volumes 1-8. Tokyo Ghoul, Volumes 1-13. Magic Knight Rayearth, Volumes 1-3. The Betrayal Knows My Name, Volumes... just Volume 4, apparently. Wither, The Night Circus. Nabari no O, Volumes 1-14. Natsume's Book of Friends, Volumes 1-15. Umaneko When They Cry, Volume 1. Dictatorial Grimoire, Volume 1-2. Anakin, Volume 1-2. Doll Song, Volume 1-2. 1984. Midnight Rubber. Fushigi Yugi, Volumes 1-8. Like People in History. Ship of Magic. The Fault in Our Stars. The Book Thief. City of Heavenly Fire. Pandora Hearts, Volumes 1-9, and finally, The Handmaid's Tale. I read some really good books that year. Some of those books I really kind of want to reread now as well. Like, I think I remember one of my favourites I read was for university, but it was really hard to find. It was called Midnight Rubber, and I really enjoyed it, and I really want to get a hold of a copy of it at some point, because I want to see if it still holds up, but I just remember really I think it was like magical realism or something. Now we are getting into when I started slowing down reading. So this is after university, and you can tell because I went from like 200 something in 2014 to only 38 books in 2015. That was the year my reading died, and it took a long time, as you'll see, for it to get back to where I am at today. So yeah, I only read 38 books. Of those 38 books, 9 of them were 5 stars. But let's have a look at what Goodreads thought was my favourite book. Average rating wise, wow, there's not a lot. So my best book according to Goodreads was Pandora Hearts Volume 7 with an average rating of 4.48. I did give it a 5 star, so not wrong. So it was a manga again for that year. If I had to pick what I think my favourite book of the year was, I think I would go with a series I read by Mark Lawrence, I think, which was King of Thorns. It was the Prince of Thorns series, and I'd already read Prince of Thorns, but I read the sequels, King of Thorns and Emperor of Thorns, that year, and I remember really liking them. I gave them both a 5 star. They are books that I need to reread because I know people have very mixed opinions on them. It's very like grimdark kind of fantasy, and I think the main protagonist basically splits people. People either if they either like him or they hate him. So, but personally for me, I read it, me and my friend really enjoyed those books, and for me, they were my favourite books of the year, for sure. Both were 5 stars. So, looking at what Goodreads thought was my worst book of the year. Oh, okay, so it's actually a book that is still pretty highly rated, actually. It's an average rating of 3.65, which honestly isn't bad. And it's another manga, this time by someone called Ryo Takahashi, and it's called Toxic, Volume 1. It is, I believe, a military series. I think it's like a military kind of fantasy. There's like no details about it on Goodreads, but I do remember liking it. It wasn't like a 5 star for me, but I gave it a 4 star, so I clearly did like it. So that was the worst book of the year according to Goodreads. Honestly, not a bad rating, so nothing too bad that year. If I had to look at my own worst rating, however, though, I would say, oh, it's another manga though, and I remember why I rated this so harshly. So it is, I read these omnibus sets of Kitchen Princess, and it was like 3 big omnibus volumes with each one with like 3 different manga in it. So I read the final omnibus volume 3, which was volumes 5 to 7 basically, and there was a drastic shift in tone. It was a very like cute slice of life kind of series, and then I remember it just got really dark in the final like bit, and I hated the direction it went, so I gave it a 1 star. So it has an average rating of 4.29, but I just hated the direction it took, so it got a 1 star from me. That was my worst book of 2015. I had 9 5-stars, and they were as following. We have Pandora Hearts, Volume 5 and 7. Not really sure why I only read those volumes that year. Maybe I reread them. I'm not really sure. The Bane Chronicles, King of Thorns and Emperor of Thorns, and finally we have Seraph at the End, volumes 1 to 4. So not too many, and a lot of manga again. Okay, on to 2016. So I did read a little bit better this year, but I was still kind of in the lower regions. So I read 71 books that year. 22 of those were 5 stars, but of those 22, 20 of them were just one series. So it was a very long manga series that I love. So technically it's only 3 things were a 5-star, but it's just that there was a long series for one of them. So not as bad as it sounds. So let's have a look at what Goodreads thinks was my best book for that year. This is a spoiler, but it is indeed for that series that I did rate a 5-star. It is specifically Volume 18 of The Honor of the Dawn by Mizuho Kusanagi, which is a fantasy series about a princess who ends up basically, her father gets killed and she ends up having to run away and fight to regain her throne. It's a really good series. I highly recommend it. It has an average rating of 4.72 on Goodreads. I rated it a 5-star, so I guess I'm in agreement. Is it my favourite of the year, though? I don't think it is. Let's have a look at what I read this year. So, of the 5 stars I read, I think it's got to be The Ocean at the End of the Lane by Neil Gaiman. I think that was my favourite book. It's got an average rating of 4.02, but I think I read it in one afternoon, and I just really loved it. I really enjoyed it. I know it's got a play adaptation now, which I love to see how they do it. So I think that was my favourite book of 2016. Looking at the worst books then, Goodreads thinks my worst book, that's quite funny, sitting at an average rating of 3.49, still quite high, but it's Harry Potter and the Cursed Child, parts 1 and 2. I was quite generous back then and I gave it a 3-star. I just kind of thought it was average, I guess. I would probably rate it lower now. I don't own it anymore. I gave it away, I'm pretty sure. Wasn't a fan, just didn't enjoy it that much. Thought the story was really crap. So yeah, I would probably re-rate that now. But yeah, that checks out that is my worst book of Goodreads. Well, according to Goodreads. What I think though, rating-wise, I would have to say I did read something worse than that this year. It was, funnily enough, a spin-off novel from the Walking Dead series. I was only like about 3 seasons into Walking Dead when I found this book at the library. It's part of the Walking Dead novels series and it's volume 2, called The Road to Woodbury by Robert Kirkman. It has an average rating of 3.7, but I gave it a 2-star. I don't remember much about this. I just remember it being bad. It had no charm to it. I didn't like any of the characters. It apparently kind of delves into how the governor was created, who is one of like the villains in, I think it's like season 2 or season 3 of The Walking Dead, but it just wasn't good. I literally don't even remember anything about it, but don't recommend. So yeah, that was what I think was my worst book. So I've given away most of them, I think, anyway, but all my 5 stars, of which there were 22, volume 1 to 20 of Akatsuki no Yona accounts for the 20 of them. Then we have The Ocean at the End of the Lane and My Hero Academia Volume 1. So they were all my 5 stars for 2016. 2017, this was a bad reading year for me. I read 37 books in 2017 and I had no 5-star reads. I think this was probably when I started to actually be a bit more analytical. I probably was the year previous as well, I just really liked Akatsuki no Yona. But I was definitely getting more analytical. This is actually when I was about to start my postgraduate. I was doing my master's around this time for library and information science. So I have a feeling there's probably going to be some academic books in here again. So let's have a look at what Goodreads thought was my best book of 2017. According to Goodreads, it is actually a manga series and it is volume 5 of Yokohama Kaidaishi Kiko by Hitoshi Ashinano. So it's a sort of sci-fi series which is very slice of life. I believe it's called, if it's translated to, Record of a Yokohama Shopping Trip. And I think it's about this robot who just kind of drives around on a moped, basically. I don't remember it too well. I remember it had a lot of higher ratings, which is why I read it, but I just didn't click with it. So I personally rated it 3-star. It was not a favourite of mine. Was my favourite, however. It's obviously not a 5-star because I didn't have any, but it was rated a 4-star, and it was a autobiography called Welcome to My World by Johnny Weir, who, if you don't know, is a quite famous American ice figure skater. This was around the time that I was getting into ice skating, basically, so it makes sense why that was like one of my favourite reads. He's an amazing skater, he's really interesting, and I just really like this autobiography, so yeah, that was my best book of the year. My worst book of the year, according to Goodreads then, I suspect is going to be something academic. Yes, it is. It is called, rivetingly, Introduction to Modern Information Retrieval, the 3rd edition, by G.G. Chowdhury. It has an average rating of 2.7, and I rated it a 2. How many ratings does this even have? Not a lot, yeah. It's like got 20 reviews, 116 ratings, so I didn't affect it too badly, but it's not well liked. So yeah, that was something that I read for university. If we're going down to what is not an academic book, then it's actually something which is also my own worst book of the year. So for once, Goodreads didn't get it too wrong. It is a short novella called Forgotten Girl. And it was part of this weird thing that they were doing as like free ebooks, and it was like season 1, episode 1 or something. And it's like a weird Wizard of Oz steampunk fantasy kind of thing. It was really short, but its average rating is a 3.08 and I gave it a 1-star, so I did not enjoy it. I think it's got very cool artwork, which is probably what drew me in, and I was just like, ooh, steampunk, it's Wizard of Oz, and I like all those things, but don't remember a damn thing about it. I just obviously didn't like it. And it's not got amazing reviews either, so I don't think it's massively well liked. For once, me and Goodreads were in agreement with what my worst book of the year was. And I know 5 stars, so we're going to move swiftly on to 2018, which was still a bad reading year for me. I hadn't yet got back into reading properly. I was definitely still doing my master's degree at this time, but it's probably like half of the year I was probably doing my master's, and the other half I'd finished it and I was like busy working, and I was struggling to read normally again, I think. Yeah, it wasn't a good reading year, basically. So I only read 36 books, but I did have 2 5-stars, so I'm gonna say it's better than 2017 in that case. So looking at what Goodreads thinks was my favourite book of the year. Oh, another manga, funnily that. So it is Land of the Lustrous, Volume 8 by Haruko Ichikawa, with an average rating of 4.61, and I rated it a 3. So I wasn't massive on this particular volume, and I know it's only this particular volume because I love this series. For anyone that doesn't know, it is kind of like a sci-fi series where humans don't exist anymore, but there's this like race of people who are literally kind of humanoid gemstones, and each character is kind of like a different gemstone, and we follow Lapis, who is kind of like this gemstone that is very malleable, but who shatters really easily. So there's essentially like a war going on between these gemstone people and these like people from the moon who try and harvest the gem people. And sorry, their name is not Lapis, it's Phos. Yeah, they're called Phos, so like phospholite, I think is what they're made of. But yeah, basically they're kind of like too weak to be able to join the fight, but they end up kind of going on this like journey of discovery. And it's such a good series. It has an amazing anime, one of the few instances of CGI animation in anime done perfectly. So it is definitely a series I'd recommend, but I think as I enjoyed the first like 6 or so volumes, and then the story kind of started going down a path that I wasn't too keen on. I'm waiting for it to finish, if it hasn't already finished, so I can go and like complete it and see if I do like where the story eventually went. So even though it is, I'd say the series as a whole is still rated quite high, for me this volume isn't, because this is later on in the series. So yeah, that was, according to Goodreads, my best book of the year. It's definitely not. I can tell you now that my best book of the year was Reasons to Stay Alive by Matt Haig. That book just hit me at the right time. Full disclosure, that was probably my worst year mental health-wise that I've ever had, and I was really struggling that year, and that book was something that just helped me so much. So it's always going to be a book that's special to my heart. Moving on to my worst book of the year then, according to Goodreads. Yeah, I was going to say, I have a feeling it's going to be something academic, and I was right. So it's another riveting title called Developing a Successful Service Plan by Sheila Pantry, which has an average rating of 2 and a rating by me of 2. Am I the only rating again? I am. Well, that's awkward. So let's have a look to see what is the first non-academic book. We have 4 in a row here that I've rated, that are rated quite low, and they're all academic. But the first book that is not academic then, that is the worst book according to Goodreads, is Citrus Volume 1. Average rating of 3.71. I rated it a 3. It was fine. It's like it's a cute girls love manga. I don't love some of the tropes of the relationship between the two characters. It gets a little bit, not abusive, but there are some issues around consent that I wasn't keen of in this series, but it's alright. It's not the worst thing I've ever read, it was just fine. So that was Goodreads' worst. My worst book, if we're ignoring all the academic stuff, because I obviously rated quite a few things that were academic books, like 1s and 2 stars and that. Okay, but it's actually going to be a 3-star book in that case. I did rate all of Citrus like 3 stars. I rated Girlfriend, which is another girls love manga, 3 stars. But if I'm looking at the worst books, I'm gonna have to say that it's the first It's All for the Game book by Nora Sakavik, The Foxhole Court. I know this is a really popular series. A lot of my friends adore it. It has an average rating of 4.02, which is really good, but it just wasn't for me. Like, I rated it a 3. I was just like, it's fine. I think I may even rate it lower now, I'm not sure. It just wasn't for me, basically. I didn't love the characters. I didn't love the plot. So it just didn't work. So that would be my worst book of the year. And then I only had 2 5-stars, and one of those was Reasons to Stay Alive, and the other one was Royal Assassin by Robin Hobb. So I was finally reading Robin Hobb around that time. We're catching up to modern day now, and we are on 2019, and I read 48 books, so still in the struggle bus here with my reading. I had 3 5-stars though, so not too bad. We're slowly getting up there in terms of my quality of reading. Goodreads thinks that my best book of the year was the 3rd book in the Captive Prince series by C.S. Packet, King's Rising. It has an average rating of 4.43. Makes sense, because sequels do often tend to get rated higher, because if you're still reading a series, you're already kind of liking it and invested. So usually, unless the series itself has dropped off, they'll get decent ratings. I did rate it a 5-star, and it is one of my 5 stars of the year. I really enjoyed this series. This is still one of my favourite male fantasy series. So that was the highest book of the year according to Goodreads. I love that book, but I would say it's not my favourite book of the year. For me, it's going to have to be I'll Give You the Sun by Jandy Nelson. It does have an average rating of 4.16, so quite popular. And yeah, like, I happened upon this book by chance in the library. It just happened to be there on one of, like, they have these little bookshelves just outside the library. I just, like, books that the librarians had picked out, and I just picked it up and I was like, sure, it looks fine. And I loved it. I thought it was so well done. I love the characters, I love the story, just, it really hit me. So that was my favourite book of the year. Easily, honestly, it was so good. So the worst book of the year, according to Goodreads, is something called Spark by Nora Casey. It has a 3.07 average rating and I gave it 2 stars, so I clearly didn't like it. What is it about? It looks like it's a self-help book. It's talking about how, yeah, it's a self-help book. So basically this was a person called Nora Casey. Her husband is diagnosed with cancer and she is taking stock of her life and wants to achieve great things. So it's just kind of like an autobiography, self-help kind of thing, and don't remember a damn thing, but clearly I didn't like it. Oh, I reviewed it actually. I dropped it. So I said in my review, dropped after 60 pages. It was interesting at first, but just not for me. May go back to it another 20 years. So I guess it was a book that was just not for me at that time of life. So that was quite funny. So yeah, that was what it thought was the worst book of the year. It doesn't sound like it was that offensive to me though, so I don't think it was my personal worst book of the year. Let's have a look. What have we got here? So I've got no 1 stars, but I do have a bunch of 2 stars. Oh, here we go. So this is also a book I dropped, and it's Eleanor Oliphant is Completely Fine by Gail Honeyman. I know this is quite popular. It has an average rating of 4.24, but I did not get on with it. I really didn't like the main character. I didn't like where the main story was going. And I've heard really good things about how it's supposed to be such a really good representation for certain things, but I just hated it. I just could not get into it. So I think that, for me, is the most memorable worst book of the year. There's a bunch of others that I rated 2 stars, but I don't think any of them are necessarily dreadful. They just didn't work for me. There was also something called Boy Meets Boy by David Levithan, which I apparently also dropped. Not sure why. I think it may actually have just been too cheesy for me. But yeah, I'm gonna go with Eleanor Oliphant as being my worst book because it was the book that I had the most drastic reaction to. Okay, and my 5 stars then for the year was Princess Gambit, which is the 2nd book in that series. King's Rising was the 3rd book, and then I'll Give You the Sun. 2020, I only read 28 books. Bad reading year. I did, however, got 1 5-star, and that was The Starless Sea by Erin Morgenstern. There's only one, so I'm just going to spoil it now. Which also means that you know what my best book of the year was. Let's see, however, if Goodreads agrees with my best book of the year. I suspect not, because I've heard some people talk about The Starless Sea, but I don't think it got as popular as The Night Circus. Even though I weirdly think it's the one that I think people would like more than The Night Circus. So technically, I wouldn't really call this a read, but my best book of the year was The Curse of Strahd D&D book by Christopher Perkins. It has a 4.5 average rating. I rated it a 4. It's good, it's great. It's not a book you really read though. It's a book for planning your D&D sessions. So let's look at the next one. Okay, not a bad one there. 6 of Crows by Leigh Bardugo, which is an average rating of 4.49. I rated it a 4. Really enjoyed it. Good book. Not my favourite of the year, as you know, because that is The Starless Sea. I have a lot of just sentimental memories as well for The Starless Sea, because I went to an author event for it on its release, so I got to meet the author. She gave us really good talk and I got to have it signed by her, so it has sentimental reasons for me as well. That's probably another reason why it's a 5-star for me, honestly. Six of Crows, not bad. I'll give you that, Goodreads. It's definitely not my favourite book, but it was probably one of my favourite books of the year. So, not the worst. My worst book of the year then, according to Goodreads, is a single BL manga called Double Cast by Ellie Mamahara. It has an average rating of 3.18, and I clearly didn't like it because I gave it 2 stars. I think it's about that they're both like actors or something and they have to act together. It wasn't great, basically. Not my worst book of the year, however, I would say, and that book for me is I Am J. It's the only book I gave a 1 star to. I'm pretty sure I dropped it, but I dropped it quite far in. I basically had hit the point where I was like, I cannot take this book anymore. I wrote a review for it, actually, because I felt very strongly about this one. I did. So, for those who don't know, I Am J is a book by Chris Beam. It's an LGBT book about someone called Jay who is struggling to find their true self, and they are a trans man. They're Latino, I think, as well, and there's an awful lot of stuff about them. There's a lot of struggle about how people see them, but I really didn't like how misogynistic they were to everybody, to all the women around them. I just really struggled with it, and I didn't think it was a very good representation of trans men because it was just very toxic. My rating for it basically says dropped at the halfway point because Jay was intolerable. The whole book read so masochistically, I couldn't stand it. So yeah, that for sure was my worst book of the year. I don't think I'd ever give it another try, honestly. Like, I just really hated the main character so much. Someone else says it perfectly here in the comments. The homophobia and misogyny was relentless, went more or less unaddressed. So it was just upsetting to me for those reasons, and I was struggling with my own gender identity at that time. So that's one of the reasons why I picked this book up, because I was kind of searching for things that I could relate to, and this was very much not that. So yeah, it didn't work for me, and I don't know, it probably does work for some people. There are probably people out there who can really relate to this. So those were my best and worst books, and I only had 1 5-star, it was The Starless Sea. So moving on, 2021, I only read, well, I'm starting to read a little bit better here. The numbers are slowly creeping up, but it was still not great. So I read 55 books, and I had 2 5-stars. Goodreads thinks my best book of the year, that's quite funny. So last year we had Six of Crows. This year we have Crooked Kingdom, which is the sequel. Has an average rating of 4.6, and I gave it a 4-star. So, again, I liked it. It was good. I do enjoy that series. It's my favourite series by Leigh Bardugo that I've read so far. I don't think it was my favourite book, though. Okay, yes, I know what my favourite book was. This was the year I discovered Sean and Maguire, which means that this is the year I started my book club, because it was one of our first book club books that we read. So this is Every Heart a Doorway, which is the first book in the Wayward Children series by Sean Maguire. Has an average rating of 3.82, 5-star for me. Absolutely love it. Adore it. It made me love portal fantasy. I still need to read the rest of the series, but it was just a perfect book for me. I could gush about it for ages, basically. So yeah, that was my favourite book of the year. Looking at the worst books of the year then. So it is a book with a 3.28 rating, and I remember this book because I got this from like a book box, like a mystery book box kind of thing. It may have been given to me, I'm not quite sure. But it's a book called Historically Inaccurate by Shay Bravo. It has a 3.28 rating, and I gave it 3 stars. So it wasn't the worst book I ever read, it was just kind of fine. It is all about this girl called Sol, and her mother has been deported a year ago, and everything is just kind of different now, and she ends up getting involved in this like weird initiation ritual with this history club at school, and I just wasn't keen on it. It wasn't amazing. I kind of just wanted it to be more than it really was, unfortunately, and just didn't quite do it. So definitely not my worst book of the year, though. Let's say it was just kind of a mid book for me. Looking at my worst book of the year then, let's see what it is. So I am the culprit of having not rated a couple here. there was a bunch of stuff that I read for university and some other D&D books, which I just didn't feel the need to rate. Okay, here we go. My worst book of the year then was this free book I got given by, well, it was a book I got given by a friend of mine, which I think she won it in a Goodreads giveaway back when they were still like delivering them to the UK, because they don't anymore. I didn't finish it. I'd had it for years actually, and I think this was me like finally trying to get to some of the old books that I hadn't got to, and this one was just not good. It's a paranormal fantasy romance basically called Firestorm by Dawn Gray. It's apparently part of a series called Spirit. How many books are in this series? There are 3 books in this series apparently that were all published between the years of 2011 to 2014. It wasn't good. I dropped it not far in, I don't think. The writing was just dreadful. I gave it a 1 star. I just couldn't get past how bad the writing was. Just, nah, it wasn't it. If you go for a book that I did actually finish though, then it's gonna be, I feel bad saying this, but it's Holly Black's second and third books in her Modern Fairy Tale series. So the first book was Typh, then it was Valiant and Ironside. I think, because I was rereading this, I remember, because I read Typh years back and I'd loved it, and I'd managed to pick up the sequels, so I wanted to like try reading the rest of them. I can't remember if Typh held up on a reread. I don't think it did, but I stuck with it and I ended up reading the sequels as well, but they just weren't good. So my rating here is a 5 star for Typh, but I think that is not the edition. I think that was when I first read it. I feel like I forgot to... No, here we go. So I reread Typh. I gave it a 3 star, dropped it all the way down from a 5 star, but I clearly didn't hate it. I think there was still stuff I liked about it. Then I decided to read the 2 sequels, Valiant and Ironside, and I just lost interest. I just didn't think it worked, sadly. It's a shame because I really do like some of Holly Black's stuff. And I loved Typh, but yeah, no, I did not like the sequels to that, so they were both 2 stars for me. So yeah, those were my worst books of the year. 2 5 stars, one of them Every Heart a Doorway, and the other one was Vicious by V. Schwab. Still love that book. Cannot wait to read the sequel. I'm just really slow and I haven't got to it yet. Okay, 2022, so last year's books. 2022, I want to think, is basically the year I finally got back into reading. It wasn't that long after the pandemic hit. The pandemic is really when I was able to start reading again for fun, because university just kind of killed it for me. So I still was reading quite slowly at that point, but I think last year was the year when reading just clicked with me again. This year in particular, you'll see reading has majorly clicked with me, and I've just been reading faster and faster, but yeah, 2022 was a good year for me. It was the year I really got back into books. It was the year I discovered BookTube, I think, as well, which really helped me sort of think about what I was reading and start diversifying my reading more and realising what books I like. So, I read 72 books that year, and I had 5 stars. And looking at this list I've got here of 5 stars, these still hold true for me. And I can tell now that I'm finally like reading 5 stars that are 5 stars, basically. So let's have a look at what Goodreads thinks was my favourite book of the year. At the very top then, we have Chainsaw Man, Volume 9. Another manga! Surprise! Chainsaw Man's a really good series. I do recommend it, although it gets very gory. It gets very dark. It's more of a horror action series, I'd say, than it is a standard sort of action manga series. It has an average rating of 4.64, and I rated this volume in particular 4 stars. So, solid series. Not a 5 star for me, but solid series. My favourite book, however, though, gosh, this is hard. For me, personally, my favourite book of last year was Iron Widow by Ziran J. Zhao. I love this book so much. It's one of the first books that I've read in a while that I've instantly just gone on to my friends and yelled at them and recommended it and just been like, please read this, it's so good. Cannot wait for the sequel coming out at some point in 2024. Has an average rating of 4.09. 5 star for me. Love it, love it, love it, love it. Okay, my worst books then. Let's have a look-see. So, according to Goodreads, my worst book with a 2.68 rating, and one that I think is correct. I gave this a 2 star. It's a book that a lot of other people don't like either, and it is quite a well-read book. And it is Nothing But Black and Teeth by Cassandra Khaw. And the funny thing about this is that I still own this book, funnily enough. I haven't actually done hold it yet, because I want to give it another go. I don't think I'm going to love it. But the weird thing is that I read another book by this author this year, and I loved it. So this book didn't work for a lot of people, but her second book really did. So I'm kind of not wanting to write this author off, because I just loved her second book. But yeah, worst book of the year, according to Goodreads, and honestly, no, it's not my worst book of the year, because it's just a short novella, and honestly there wasn't anything offensive about it. It was just kind of meh. It wasn't really scary, it just didn't really work, but I still think there were some good ideas about it. My worst book of the year, I don't know if this is controversial or not, because I think this is quite well liked by some people. This is one that I read with my book club, and we were all very interested in this book. This book was requested for us to read by many people who saw the cover and just wanted to read it based off that, basically. But it is Manhunt by Gretchen Falcon Martin. Average rating 3.57. I gave it a 2 star. Just didn't like it. I do like me some horror. I don't mind me some gore, but this was just too much for me. I found all the characters to be basically irredeemable. I think it was the one character I really liked, and I just had to watch this one character go through such absolute torture, and it just was not good. It wasn't fun. Honestly, some of the imagery in this, like, I still feel sick looking back at it now. But anyone that remembers, this was the book that caught a whole load of like hype and controversy because it basically killed off J.K. Rowling, like in a side passage. It really wasn't a big part of the book, and I think people thought it was going into it. But this whole book is kind of about TERFs and this futuristic dystopian society where men have all turned into horrific zombie monsters and only women are alive, but it comes from the perspective of trans people, specifically trans women. So it's got some really good ideas, don't get me wrong, but I just hated it. It was too much for me. It touched on a lot of themes that made me very uncomfortable, and I wouldn't recommend it, honestly. So it's not a 1 star for me, because I do think there were some good ideas. I did manage to finish it, but didn't like it. So that was my worst book of the last year. So I had 5 stars, and they were Black Sun, I Am Widow, Legends and Lattes, The Language of Fawns, and My Best Friend's Exorcism. Okay, we're finally here. 2023. Okay, so like I said at the beginning of this video, it isn't the end of the year yet for me, but it's almost the end of the year. There are 6 days or so left until the end of 2023, and I don't think, realistically, I'm going to be reading anything that's going to be in my best or my worst. So far, at the time of filming, I have read 129 books this year. I'm finally back in my reading era. I love it. I'm having the best time ever reading again. I've just rediscovered my joy, basically, whilst reading, and I've had some really good books this year. I've also had some bad books this year, but on the whole, I've really enjoyed this year. It's been a good reading year. It's been a great reading year, honestly. Yeah, 129 books at this current time. I think I'll probably be getting close to like 131, 132, but you'll see that when I do my end of year stats, what the final number is. I have 11 5 stars, so pretty good. And they're all solid 5 stars as well. So let's have a look at what Goodreads thinks is my best book of the year. And surprising nobody, really, it's Fourth Wing by Rebecca Yarros. Currently sitting at an average rating of 4.62. That is insane. I gave it 5 stars. It's not my favourite book of the year, but I really loved it. It was really good. Funnily enough, because this book only just came out and I did buy it pretty much on release, Heartstopper Volume 5 is currently sitting second at an average rating of 4.59. Interesting to see if the average rating will drop, but at the moment it's not been out very long and it's really highly rated. It's close to knocking Fourth Wing off at this point in time. That was the highest book according to Goodreads. For me, however, so I actually really struggled to pick because I've had some really solid books this year, but I looked back and I was just trying to think of the book that I think I enjoyed the most. There's been so many books that had like this major impact on me, and I've enjoyed basically all of these books that are a 5-star, but I think the one for me that was my favourite one of the year is The Adventures of Amina Al-Sarafi by Shannon Chakraborty. It was perfect for me. It was such a fun time. I just was loving every minute that I was spending in this book. I was never bored. I always wanted more. I never had any ounce of boredom or irritation or annoyance while reading it. It was just great. It was just a well-crafted, really fun adventure fantasy story, and I highly recommend it if you haven't checked it out yet. So it has an average Goodreads rating of 4.31 at the current time, so it's still up there, but it's not like as up there as Fourth Wing, but 5-star for me, obviously. My worst books of the year. Let's see what Goodreads thinks it is. So it's an average rating of 3.31, which isn't awful. Is The Evil Within Volume 2 The Interlude by Ryan O'Sullivan. This was a graphic novel, like spin-off graphic novel based off the Evil Within horror game series. I read this back in October for Becca's Spookopolython, and I wasn't crazy on it. I gave it a 3-star. And I think for me, it wasn't that it was bad, it was just that it was confusing. Funnily enough, the one right below that on the list is also something I read in that same month, and it's Hyde by Kirsten White with an average rating of 3.33. I know this one gets a lot of hate. I personally didn't hate it. I thought it was just fine. I gave it 3 stars, so I enjoyed my time with it. It was not a masterpiece, but for me at least it wasn't the worst book of the year. What was my worst book of the year, however? Let's see. So there's a couple of books that I abandoned, whether it's because they just weren't for me or I just wasn't feeling in the mood for it. So we've got books like The Only Good Indians, The Night Watch, The Ex-Hex, Kafka on the Shore. My 2-star books, so it's not a 1-star book. It's The Magician's Guild by Trudy Canavan. Has an average rating of 3.95. I gave it 2 stars. And the reason for it is that I have never read a fantasy book that was so mid. I think I read this quite a while ago. I think this was technically a reread for me, but I read it back when I had just started getting into fantasy, and I think I liked it okay at that point, but this is an old series. Let's have a look when it was first published. It's funny because I'm pretty sure this has very recently got like a whole bunch of special editions from like Illumicrate or Fairy Loot or something. And this first came out in 2001. It's a high fantasy magic book, basically, about this woman that has wild magic and these wizards who are trying to find her because she could be too powerful and women are not supposed to do magic, blah, blah, blah. And I just found it really boring, honestly. I didn't enjoy it. I know it's got a lot of high ratings, but for me, I just found it very average. I didn't find a lot to enjoy about it. There wasn't a lot that stuck with me, so I wouldn't say it's a bad book. I can see why people really enjoy it, but for me, there just wasn't anything that I had to grasp onto. Nothing stuck with me. So it's a shame, but I just didn't enjoy it in the slightest. It wasn't offensive. It just wasn't anything for me. It is the worst book of the year for me. I wrote over 2 stars, which I'll probably also talk about in my proper end of year stats, but for me, just for how average it was, it's my worst book. So that feels a bit like we were ending on a whimper rather than a bang. So I'm going to tell you all of the 5 stars that I've read this year, because we have 11 of them, and I'm pretty happy with how solid these are. So we have Her Body and Other Parties, Red, White and Royal Blue, The Stardust Thief, Juniper and Thorn, The Adventures of Amina Al-Sarafi, In the Lies of Puppets, The Writing Retreat, Fourth Wing, The Shadow Cabinet, Divine Rivals, and Heartstopper Volume 5. So yeah, that was really fun to kind of research this, to compile all the data. It's so interesting just looking back at my reading tastes over the last 10 years. I used to read so much manga. I really want to get more into that again. Don't get me wrong, I'm loving being back into reading full-length novels again because it feels like I'm finally like in that era again. But I want to read more manga again. It feels like I haven't read very much manga this year. It feels like I've not read very many good manga this year. So would definitely like to get back into manga again. And yeah, it's interesting because I feel like me and Goodreads did not agree for a lot of the time. I often did agree with that what Goodreads thought was the worst was often not great, but I often found books a lot worse than that as being my actual worst. And I think rarely was their favourite book also my favourite book. So I can definitely confirm that Goodreads and me don't really match up. We have some similarities in what it thinks is good, I think is good, but I'm definitely, yeah, we don't match. We don't match fully, and I think that's about what I expected. I really didn't think that I was going to fully match up with what Goodreads thinks is the best or the worst, but it was interesting to do this and to see. And yeah, if you've managed to stay here for the full thing, thank you. I hope you found it as interesting as I did, just looking back at these stats. I guess you're seeing a little bit more about what things I read before I joined BookTube. And I thought it'd be nice to share that with you as well. So that is it from me. Feel free to comment down below what your best and worst books of the year was, and if they're different to what Goodreads ratings are, I'd be really intrigued to see what other people have found with their experience of the average rating compared to their own rating. So that is it for now. Stay safe, stay cozy, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye!